I. Parliamentary system. 1. Parliamentary system. A. Definition of the parliamentary system. The parliamentary system is a form of government where the executive branch derives its democratic legitimacy from its ability to command the confidence of the legislature, typically a parliament, and is also held accountable to that legislature. In this system, the legislative and executive branches are interconnected, leading to a fusion of powers and a unity of source of legitimacy, since both the cabinet and the parliament emerge from and are sustained by the same electoral process. B. Characteristics of the parliamentary system. Cabinet accountability to Parliament. In the parliamentary system, the government is run by a cabinet that is elected by and accountable to Parliament. The government's existence depends on maintaining the confidence of the Parliament. If the cabinet loses this confidence, it must resign, which ensures that the government reflects the will of the parliamentary majority. Integration of legislative and executive functions. Unlike the presidential system where these branches are separate and co-equal, in the parliamentary system, the executive is drawn from the legislature and is dependent on legislative support to function effectively. This integration allows for potentially more cohesive and unified policymaking, but can also lead to concerns about the concentration of power. Variability based on political context. The structure and functioning of parliamentary systems can vary widely, depending on historical and political contexts. This variability affects how powers are balanced between the legislature and the executive. For instance, there have been systems with executive dominance, as in the Weimar Republic, parliamentary dominance, as in France's Fourth Republic, and balanced systems as in the United Kingdom. Right of no confidence and dissolution powers. A critical feature is the Parliament's right to issue a vote of no confidence in the government, which can lead to the dissolution of the government or even new elections. Conversely, in some parliamentary systems, the executive may have the power to dissolve the parliament and call for early elections, which acts as a check on parliamentary power. Historical evolution and adaptation. Many parliamentary systems have evolved from experiences of distrust in previous governmental forms, e.g. the presidential system in South Korea's Second Republic. These systems are often adapted to local conditions and may include safeguards such as limits on the executive's power to dissolve parliament, intended to prevent political instability and ensure fair play. The parliamentary system, with its emphasis on the integration of powers and mutual checks between the branches of government, reflects a flexible yet structured approach to democracy that adapts to the needs and historical conditions of different countries. Two types of parliamentary government forms. Parliamentary governments vary in form. depending on how power is distributed between the cabinet and the parliament. These forms have evolved historically to meet the demands of expanding state functions and the complexities of political dynamics. Here are three primary types of parliamentary government forms. A prime minister-centered cabinet system. Characteristics: this form is marked by the central role of the prime minister, who exercises strong leadership over state affairs and wields considerable power, often more so than any other cabinet member. This system tends to emerge in countries with a dominant single-party government, where the prime minister is the clear leader of the governing party. Efficiency and stability: it is considered efficient and stable because of the decisive leadership provided by the prime minister, facilitating swift decision-making and policy implementation. Example: the United Kingdom is a prime example of this system, where the prime minister holds significant sway over both the cabinet and the parliament, guiding national policy and government direction. 2. Parliamentary-centered cabinet system. Characteristics in this system: the cabinet often functions more as a subcommittee of the parliament, rather than as an independent executive force. The prime minister and other cabinet members may have less autonomy, and their ability to govern depends heavily on maintaining the confidence of the parliament. Challenges: this type of cabinet system is frequently criticized for its political instability, as the government can be prone to frequent changes if it loses parliamentary support. The cabinet's dependence on parliament can lead to inefficiencies and a lack of clear, strong leadership. Historical context: historically, this form was common in the parliamentary systems of the early to mid-19th century, such as in the British cabinet system before its evolution in the late 19th century and in the Third French Republic. 3. Cabinet-centered cabinet system. Characteristics: this system arises when the expansion of suffrage and the rise of mass political parties shift the balance of power significantly towards the cabinet. The cabinet in this system operates with considerable independence from the parliament, leading the legislative agenda more forcefully. Independence and leadership: the cabinet has autonomy and functions as a collective executive body, with less direct control by the parliament. This can lead to a situation where the cabinet dominates the legislative process, reducing the checks and balances typically provided by parliament. Emergence: this form became more prevalent with the democratization movements that expanded voting rights and led to the emergence of strong, organized political parties, which could command substantial popular mandates. Each of these forms reflects different balances of power between the executive and legislative branches within parliamentary systems, influenced by historical, political, and social factors unique to each country where they have developed. 3 advantages of the parliamentary cabinet system. The parliamentary cabinet system offers several notable advantages that enhance governance by incorporating flexibility, inclusivity, and leadership development. These benefits contribute to its widespread adoption in various forms across the world. Here are 3 key advantages. 1. Flexibility of the political process. Responsive change. The parliamentary system allows for significant flexibility in the political process. Governments can be reformed or changed without the constraints of fixed presidential terms. This adaptability means that changes in leadership and policy can occur swiftly in response to shifting political climates or urgent issues without causing a systemic crisis. Reflection of current preferences. This flexibility ensures that government policies and leadership can quickly adapt to reflect the electorate's changing preferences. As a result, the system can remain relevant and responsive to current needs and sentiments, enhancing democratic responsiveness. 2. Inclusion and representation. Broad representation. The parliamentary system's structure, particularly in its ability to dissolve and reform governments based on election outcomes, facilitates a broad representation of diverse societal interests. It allows for the integration of a wide range of class and group perspectives into the national policymaking process. Ease of reflecting marginalized interests compared to presidential systems. Parliamentary systems can more effectively incorporate the interests of marginalized groups into the government. This is partly due to the greater ease with which coalitions can be formed, allowing for more nuanced and representative governance. 3. Development of political leadership. Dual roles. The parliamentary system often encourages lawmakers to serve concurrently as ministers, providing them with valuable legislative and executive experience. This dual role serves as an institutional mechanism for nurturing well-rounded political leaders. Collective decision-making. The collective nature of decision-making in cabinet meetings helps to distribute power among multiple individuals, rather than concentrating it in a single leader. This approach not only mitigates the risk of authoritarianism, but also promotes a more balanced and inclusive form of governance. Opportunities for growth. Participating in government provides members with the chance to develop their political and administrative skills, which is beneficial for their personal growth and for the quality of governance. Overall, the parliamentary cabinet system's advantages of flexibility, inclusive representation, and leadership development make it an attractive option for many countries seeking to combine democratic responsiveness with effective governance. 4 disadvantages of the parliamentary system. While the parliamentary system has its strengths, it also presents several challenges that can impact governance stability and effectiveness. Here are some key disadvantages associated with this form of government. 1. Political instability. 2. Risk of administrative vacuum.
This is an explanation of the two main systems of democratic government, presidential and parliamentary. Around the world, there are many variations of these two types, but we're going to focus on the United States and the United Kingdom because they exist on the opposite ends of the democratic spectrum, and they've been the most influential to other countries around the world. Every 4 years, the American people elect a president, but it's not a direct election where the winner of the overall nationwide vote wins the White House. The US is the only country to have an electoral college system, where each state has a number of electors based on the size of its relative population. Every state, except Maine and Nebraska, awards all of their electors to the candidate that receives the most votes in that state, with an overall 270 electoral votes needed to win. This more complicated system exists to give the states a little more control over the process. The Constitution limits the president to just two 4-year terms in office. In the UK, the people directly elect a representative from their geographic constituency, of which there are a total of 650 throughout England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. These representatives make up the House of Commons in Parliament. The leader of whichever party wins the most seats in this general election, which occurs every 5 years, becomes the Prime Minister, who has no term limits. The Prime Minister then forms a government. The members of Parliament from parties not in power are called the opposition. Once inaugurated, the President appoints 15 cabinet officers to run the various departments of the executive branch of government. Nominees have to be confirmed by the Senate. However, the Prime Minister's appointments for the 21 different cabinet positions need no confirmation, although they must be currently serving in either the House of Commons or the House of Lords. In the American presidential system, the power to create laws is split between the President and the lower, the House, and upper, the Senate, chambers of Congress. In America, both houses of Congress must pass a version of a bill. But for a passed bill to become a law, the President must sign it. If the president refuses, this is called a veto, the Congress can try and override the veto with a 2/3 majority vote in each chamber. The Congress is the second branch of the federal government. The third is the Supreme Court, a 9-member body whose members are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate and serve life terms. The Supreme Court is the court of last appeal and decides if state and federal laws are legal under the Constitution. The legislative body is a bit more complicated in the UK's parliament, although it also has an upper and lower chamber. Both the lower, elected House of Commons, and the upper House of Lords make and shape the laws, but the House of Lords isn't elected and is made up of officials appointed by the Queen, bishops from the Church of England, and hereditary peers, many of whom inherit their positions. Lords play a wise man's role as an unelected check on decisions made by the House of Commons. Bills are presented by the Prime Minister's government, debated and changed by both houses in the Parliament, who must then both agree on a bill for it to become law. A Supreme Court, with less power than the American version, was created in 2009. In addition to being the head of government, the American president is also the head of state, and is the official representative of the country to the rest of the world, although this role often falls to the president's Secretary of State. The President is the Commander-in-Chief of the military of the United States, although only the Congress can formally declare war. The President lives at the White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in the heart of the District of Columbia. In the UK system, the monarch is the official head of state. Legally, the monarch still has many powers, like giving final approval on all laws, but in the reality of modern times, the Prime Minister and the Cabinet run the country. The Prime Minister is also the Commander-in-Chief, in all but name. The monarch still meets weekly with the Prime Minister and has the constitutional right to, quote, warn, encourage, and be consulted. The ability of the monarch to influence the decisions of the Prime Minister varies depending on the relationship between the two leaders. It's worth noting here that the current Queen of England, Elizabeth II, has been on the throne for 63 years and is 89 years old. Her son, Charles, Prince of Wales, is her heir apparent. The monarch resides in Buckingham Palace in London, while the Prime Minister lives at 10 Downing Street. Once a year, the President delivers a State of the Union address to the joint Congress and the nation, in which they lay out their governing priorities. Since the members of the House of Representatives are elected every 2 years, the President faces a referendum on their performance halfway through each term. If their party loses seats in a midterm election, their ability to enact their agenda for the rest of the term is weakened. Every week, the Prime Minister answers questions from other members of Parliament, while simultaneously debating the leader of the opposition. This is a televised way for the people's representatives to directly challenge the Prime Minister on a whole host of issues. Besides resignation, the only way a president can be removed from office is impeachment, which is done by the House of Representatives. This is like a prosecutor bringing official charges against a defendant. If a vote to confirm the charges passes the House, the president is impeached. The Senate will then try the impeachment, but in order to convict, a two-thirds vote must be achieved by the senators. If this happens, which it never has in American history, the president is removed from office. In the UK, if the House of Commons passes a no confidence vote in the Prime Minister, or if the Prime Minister's party loses a vote on a budget, they are seen as politically weakened and will call a general election. So that's the basic differences between the American presidential and UK's parliamentary system. The president is the chief executive, while the prime minister, who is also a member of parliament, officially shares some power with the monarch. The UK's legislature, because of the House of Lords and the longer time between elections in the lower house, is less responsive to the changing whims of the people, and it is slightly easier to force a prime minister out of office than a president. You can see from this map just how many countries have been influenced by the American and British forms of government. Thanks for watching. Like this video to help it spread. You can watch our explanation of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by clicking the link on the screen, or check out our visualization of the top 10 countries where immigrants come to in the world. Until next time, for the Daily Conversation, I'm Bryce Plank. This video is edited.
일본은 세계에서 가장 많은 100세 이상의 장수 인구가 사는 국가입니다. 이 사람들의 공통점을 살펴보니 놀라운
Diversity, a word that perfectly describes India. Diversity is an Indian way of life. In the last episode of this series, we discussed the whole Indian Parliament. We learned that because of the cultural diversity, India adopted parliamentary system, and now in the first few minutes we are going to compare presidential and parliamentary form of government by taking America and India as our examples. Then some advantages and disadvantages of having parliamentary system and what is wrong with the Indian Parliament. In the end, I am going to tell you an interesting fact about the Indian voters and their psychology. So make sure you stay with me until the end. So hi guys, this is Prateek and you are watching Eclectic. In the parliamentary system, executive is responsible to the legislature, while in the presidential, executive is not responsible to the legislature. In parliamentary, executive means prime minister and his council of ministers, and legislature means two parliamentary houses, upper house which is Rajya Sabha and lower house which is Lok Sabha. In the presidential system, the president is executive and legislature in America means two chambers of the United States Congress. In the parliamentary system, prime minister is responsible to assembly. Member of parliament can question prime minister and his council of ministers regarding their policies and governance. But in the presidential system, president of United States is not responsible to the legislature. United States Congress can't influence president's decisions. In a parliamentary system, if the parliament does not like prime minister, members of parliament can cast a vote of non-confidence against prime minister to replace him, whereas in the presidential system, members of United States Congress cannot replace president unless the president commits a grave unconstitutional mistake or takes any decision which is against the constitution. The procedure of removing the president is known as the impeachment of the president, but it is very unlikely to happen. There are only two impeached presidents in the history of United States. The first one is Andrew Johnson in 1868. He was accused of violating an act. Second one, Bill Clinton in 1998 for having an extramarital affair in the White House. Bill Clinton later had to apologize for his behavior. In the parliamentary system, voters means citizens or people elect their representatives and send them to Lok Sabha, and Lok Sabha appoints the Prime Minister. The political party which has majority in Lok Sabha appoints Prime Minister and forms government. In the presidential system, the president is directly elected by voters. That's why replacing him is very difficult because the president is the choice of people. Presidential system is not good for wide representation, whereas the parliamentary system is good for wide representation. Now that the comparison is over, let's talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of having parliamentary system. Let us start with disadvantages because there are more disadvantages than advantages, and that is the rising concern of India. First, instability. An unstable government. There is no guarantee that the government can survive for 5 years. If they lose the majority in Lok Sabha, then it is over for them. Non-confidence motion can be introduced against them, and if that non-confidence motion gets enough votes, Prime Minister has to dissolve the government. And the evilest is the multi-party coalition. In Hindi, Mahagathbandhan. If some political party leaves the coalition, then again government can be taken.